with a whole lot of truth. The Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Aaron Page.
All interviews presented on the Remedy Revolution podcast are designed to provide information and inspiration only. Guests of the podcast may present opinions and anecdotes which are solely their own. And as always, before beginning any treatment protocol, please consult with your preferred medical provider. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody who I've actually met a couple of times and I've been following for quite some time. He's a fellow homeopath, which I always love to have on the show, as well as the executive producer of an upcoming movie that I do think is incredibly informational, especially for those of you who are still struggling with the question of what is homeopathy. That film is called Introducing Homeopathy, and today's guest is homeopath Kim Elia. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about this project. So as I'm sure you have struggled over the years, when I tell people I'm a homeopath, they usually look at me like I have, three heads. So why did you embark on this journey?
That's a great question. So I was involved in another project a few years back, and I was looking for a videographer. And so I went online and filled out some forms. And this fellow called up, and he was a very friendly, very affable individual. Turns out his father is an acupuncturist, so he's very sympathetic with natural and energetic medicine. Anyway, he made some short, very high quality films for us. And I thought, it would be really great if we could make a full length featured documentary, professionally produced documentary about homeopathy, because there are films already that exist, documentaries that have already been made, but they use a particular approach called a foil, where they have advocates of homeopathy contrasted with critics of homeopathy. And that is a useful, creative approach that you can use in making a documentary. But what happened in both of those films is you have somebody come out and say something fantastic about homeopathy, and then immediately there'd be this medical doctor who would come on and would say, homeopathy is nonsense and can't work and it's not plausible. And I thought, we really don't need to give Big Pharma any voice in our film. We simply need to talk about all of the amazing benefits that homeopathy has to offer humanity and plants and animals and really all living beings. And there's so much to say about it that it was really very easy to put together a 2-hour documentary on introducing homeopathy. And basically what we did is we traveled around the country. We interviewed, I think, about 35, 40 different medical doctors, maybe 20, 25 naturopathic doctors, 6, 7 PhDs. We have 2 Nobel Prize winners. We have a bunch of veterinarians, lay homeopaths. So we just tried to interview as many people as we could. I think at the end of the filming, we had interviewed over 160 people. We have about 170, 180 hours worth of footage. And basically it just required culling all that down into a very powerful communication about all of the benefits that homeopathy could offer.
So I was fortunate enough to see a preview of the film last year at the JHC, the Homeopathic Conference in San Antonio. And it was very interesting to me the way you brought in actually a sense of comedy, because there was a section where you were interviewing people on the street about what is homeopathy and, do you know what this word means? And there was a lot of confused looks, a lot of very, interesting kinds of responses. But really, that's the truth of the matter, is the vast majority of people really don't know what homeopathy is and the power that it does have. So can you tell me a little bit more about that experience? Was it eye-opening to you as a homeopath or to the filmmaker himself?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, people in general have a favorable orientation towards homeopathy. They have a favor, especially if they're interested in natural health care or alternative approaches to lifestyle, things of that nature. But for the most part, they don't know what it actually is. So you ask them these questions, and sometimes they can't even pronounce the word correctly. They'll say homeopathy or, things of that nature. And so it was a great way for us to segue into explaining exactly what homeopathy is. And it's amazing how many people out there really have no clue. Even people who are favorable or positive about it, they also don't know what it is. So that was a lot of fun. It was very entertaining. We got some great responses. One guy even said, we were doing it in Philadelphia, and one guy said, well, I'm new to Philadelphia, so who is this Samuel Hahnemann? And that was a great that was a great way to segue into explaining what it is. So
Yeah, it was hilarious, actually. I think a lot of people will think of the term homeopathy and they think it just is this broad spectrum term for anything natural or non, pharmaceutical. But so it was very interesting to kind of get a big picture of the general population and what their thoughts were on homeopathy. Tell me what the most interesting story was that was brought to you during the filming, because I know, as homeopaths, we see lots of amazing stories in our clinical practice, but I'm curious if there was something that was surprising even to you as a homeopath.
I can't say that, Aaron, that there was one story in particular. There were four major stories that ran through the film, and each of them, in their own particular way, brought something of real insight about homeopathy and what it can do to change people's lives. So, for example, there was a story of a young boy with autism and seizures who, through homeopathy, his life was transformed. And I mean, so much so that the principal of his school invited us to interview the principal and his teacher about the amazing progress he had made. And since he's been receiving homeopathic treatment, he hasn't had a seizure. I think it's now been 9 months. So very dramatic effects. There was another man, a Vietnam vet, who was exposed to Agent Orange and then subsequently contracted AIDS. He was told he was going to die, that he should basically prepare his affairs because there was nothing left to do for him. He received homeopathic care, and within a relatively short period of time, his HIV viral loads went to normal. He became asymptomatic, and now he's thriving and doing incredibly well. I mean, that's a pretty amazing story. There was a story of a young man who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, who had all kinds of drug addiction issues. He's now an aerospace engineer. And then this woman who had polycystic ovarian disease. She had all these cysts on her ovaries that would burst all the time, and she couldn't get pregnant. And then shortly after receiving homeopathic intervention, she was able to conceive and had a wonderful, beautiful little baby girl. And all these stories are, I mean, even we just watched it again yesterday because we're trying to cut it down a little bit. And I was crying, even watching it. I think I've watched the film 150 times. I was still moved emotionally by what homeopathy can do, how much it can change people's lives. Even after, what is it now, 38 years that I've been practicing homeopathy, I'm still blown away every day when I see the impact it can have in people's lives. Yeah, so
Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny because, so my practice is primarily complex pediatric cases. And so I see a lot of these, miracle stories in my own practice, but it's rare that I really get to share a whole lot about the kinds of progress that they've made. But, so I think it's amazing that, especially that you followed somebody, a child with autism, because I do think so much of that community is utilizing homeopathy to help heal these kids that really have been very medically impacted. And so I love that you followed that particular story and of course, all of the other stories as well. But that one strikes close to home for me
it's beautiful. And
personally.
he's such a beautiful little boy too. And to see him blossom and become this wonderful little human being, it's just, what more could you want, really?
Absolutely. What was your biggest takeaway throughout this process? Because I think ultimately, sometimes we get mired in perhaps, taking cases as homeopaths or as you have been doing teaching through Whole Health Now and various organizations. And so what was the biggest takeaway for you as far as spreading the message of homeopathy goes? And what is the goal of introducing homeopathy? What would you like to see in this world with that film?
Well, I said this before that I really believe that the measure of morality is what we leave for this generation and those that follow, that we leave a better world than the one that we inherited. And for me, homeopathy has been such a godsend in my own life. It's given me so many gifts in terms of healing in my own family, patients, friends, family. For me, this is an opportunity to give something back. And my objective in this film is to get as many people as possible to be aware of what homeopathy can offer to them. I don't think we currently have the resources necessary to meet that demand, but I guess that will come as the demand for homeopathy increases. And so for me personally, that's the objective, is to have millions of people that don't know about homeopathy learn about it and be able to implement it in their own lives and to see the transformation that can have. And I think, I don't know if you've seen the film or not, but at the very end, it's summed up really well that when you change one person's life, you're not just changing that person's life, you're changing many people's life. You're changing that family's life. You're changing that family's interaction with other people. You're changing the whole world in a way. So, one step at a time, we heal our patients, and it's as if the whole body of the world can change as a consequence of that.
Absolutely. So, currently people can go to the website introducinghomeopathy.com, and there is a screening coming up May 31st through June 3rd. That's an online screening. You can purchase your ticket on the website and watch the film at your leisure. Are there future plans, though, for the film, and where do you expect or anticipate for that to be able to be seen beyond June 3rd?
Okay. Yeah. So if you do want to see the film under a private screening, you can go to introducinghomeopathy.com. And then in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little icon, watch the film. And if you click on that, that's where you can purchase a ticket. The tickets are $25, but we do encourage people to have watch parties, to invite your friends, family members, colleagues, and to discuss the film afterwards. Send us an email if you have any questions. You can watch the film as many times as you want between June 29th. Sorry, I'm sorry, June 31st. No, I'm sorry, May 31st and June 4th. And the reason that we have to call these private screenings is because we're currently in discussion with Netflix to have this released on their platform. And that's really our objective right now, is to either have it released on Netflix as a Netflix original or on Amazon as an Amazon original, to get it in front of as many eyes as possible. There's a lot of requirements when you're working with Netflix, so we can't call it a premiere, for example. We have to call it a private screening. We're also in the process of discussing having it translated into many different languages. We've been contacted by probably 30 different countries. So Norway, Finland, Sweden, Serbia, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, Greece, they've all contacted us, and they'd like to have the film translated into their respective languages. We've also been invited to travel to those various countries and do what are called red carpet events. So we might be doing that starting this fall. Anyway, there seems a lot of promise and a lot of opportunities out there. And one of the things we'd really like to do, Aaron, is make a deal with Netflix that they will do a series of shorter spin-off documentaries. So we could do one, for example, on geriatrics, one on pediatrics, one on homeopathy for acute care, one maybe specifically on the use of homeopathy in autism, and so on and so forth. And I think that's really where we can get the most amount of exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea because, one of the questions I get very often is, can I use homeopathy for X condition, right? And in my mind, I think number one, there's a bit of a lack of understanding of what homeopathy is and what it can do. Because if you understand the basics of homeopathic remedies and the idea that we're looking at the whole symptom picture, I'm not looking at one particular diagnosis, then you understand that yes, in theory, homeopathy can really assist with any condition that you might bring to the table. And so I love the idea of kind of sprouting off into these various, sectors and giving people information, because I do think sometimes people will look for specificity in the treatment, and instead of, understanding something like homeopathy can really assist with the overall symptom picture, right? So I love that that you're looking to do that. So You mentioned that you've got tons of hours of footage, and I'm assuming that some of these things with Netflix would pull from some of that footage. Is there any other plans for the rest of that footage?
Uh, well, yes, we're going to release some of it on our website. We had to cut a lot of stuff out that we didn't want to cut out because we just had so much footage and really so much compelling footage. So we do have enough to make actually two or three or even four films. So we'll see. I'm not sure right now what we're going to do with it. We'll post some of it on our website for people to see, and we've got a lot of very amazing talking head stories and patient stories that we have not included in the film. So we'll have to see what we do with those.
So I'm interested to hear about some of these doctors. Was there anybody who was a staunch proponent for, conventional medicine and then transformed into an advocate for homeopathy?
That's a great question. Actually, the film opens up with something called the physician's journey or the physician's story. And basically, it's four different physicians who were, to varying degrees, very skeptical about homeopathy. Actually, one was a naturopathic student who was going to quit her naturopathic program because homeopathy was part of the program. She thought it was so crazy that they would include homeopathy that she was ready to quit her naturopathic studies altogether. So all of these, one was a medical, the two were medical doctors who had serious health issues, and then two were naturopathic doctors who also had serious health issues. They were all very skeptical. They didn't believe in homeopathy. They were all of them given homeopathic treatment, and all of their health issues were completely resolved. One woman had very serious digestive issues, completely eliminated. Another woman was a lady who could not get pregnant. But after homeopathic treatment, she was able to get pregnant. Another one was a man with plaque psoriasis who became asymptomatic within a year of treatment. And then the final one was a woman who went back to naturopathic school because after being given a remedy, she never had a sore throat again. She used to have sore throats every year. So these were these were really powerful stories to introduce the film with because first of all, these are all professionals, they're all physicians, and they all of them did not believe in homeopathy, and then all of them became either advocates of homeopathy or practitioners of homeopathy. So that's a great way, I think, to introduce the whole field of homeopathy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've interviewed many medical doctors here on the podcast, and often they are medical doctors who were of that camp. So, very much into this whole idea of medicine is the way and the only way. It's been very interesting listening to them speak about their journeys. And some of them still are unaware of what homeopathy actually is. I do try to sneak a little bit of that in. but but we're getting there. I do think that the conversations have shifted, particularly in the last several years. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, for one thing, physicians are really burnt out. They're working long hours. They're not oftentimes getting the results that they were hoping to, that they were promised that they would be getting when they went to medical school. And I think, especially over the last 3 years with what has transpired, people do not have the level of confidence in their regulatory agencies any longer. Many of these agencies are actually captured, through something called user fees. And so people are disgruntled, they're dissatisfied, they're looking for alternatives. And homeopathy really ticks off all the boxes. It's eco-friendly, it's animal-friendly, it's inexpensive, it doesn't have the side effects that you see with conventional medicines. It's easy to use, and it's highly effective. And it can profoundly transform a person's life on all levels, mental, emotional, and physical. So, it offers so much and it doesn't really have anything in the way of side effects or negative indications associated with it. So it really is the medicine of the future.
So, what do you say to the naysayers then?
I say, keep an open mind, look at the research, look at the fact that there's extensive amounts of studies that show that homeopathy is more than simply the placebo effect. The placebo effect works in every system of medicine, even surgery. But we know now statistically, based on research that's been conducted, that homeopathy is more than the placebo effect. That, it can't, one of the reasons that we show homeopathy in the treatment of animals and plants is because animals and plants don't know that they're receiving homeopathic remedies. Babies don't know that they're receiving homeopathic remedies. So we know that homeopathy is more than the placebo effect and has much to offer all living beings.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. For example, I keep chickens and I put remedies in their water at various times. And, like you said, they don't know that they're receiving the remedies, but somehow they reap the benefits. So, if that's the case, then how could this be placebo? I think that's such a strong argument, particularly for those who want to poo-poo homeopathy as being pseudoscientific or the Wikipedias and all of that.
Aaron, we've got Nobel Prize winners, some of the top people in their fields talking about how homeopathy can work. So, it's not just your average Joe on the street. It's top level scientists and medical doctors and PhDs and Nobel Prize winners who are talking about the possibilities of what homeopathy can offer.
Yeah, it's so funny. I always, think about the fact that we recognize that everything is energy, but then when we decide that we're going to give a medicine that perhaps is, energetic, then it's like, oh, well, that can't possibly work. And it's like, well, if we recognize that everything is energy, then why wouldn't energy work to help heal the body? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's so true. And in almost every other field, we recognize, the most advanced levels of physics, quantum physics, and things of that nature, except in medicine,
Right.
where somehow that's not relevant.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, kudos to you for helping to change the narrative because I do think it's very much needed. One of the things that I often struggle with is a lot of times when you have amassed a large amount of knowledge, when you're trying to speak to people who have zero knowledge on that topic, a lot of times you start above the root, right? So I just last this past week's podcast was all about the principles, the basic principles of homeopathy. That even when I'm up speaking to people who don't understand homeopathy, sometimes I gloss over some of the basic principles, and but I do think sometimes it's so important to go back to the very beginning. And I know a lot of your courses and study has really been in homeopathic history and the organon and all of those kinds of things. How do you think that shaped the narrative of the film?
That's a great question. Because when you make a film like this, you want to try to reach as broad an audience as possible. And we really had that in mind, to reach the general public, but also to reach the scientific community as well. We didn't want to dumb this down so
Right.
that, that medical doctors and scientists wouldn't be able to appreciate what we were trying to communicate. So that's a balancing act, because you want to keep it entertaining, you want to keep it funny, you want to keep it so there are stories that people are emotionally involved with. So it was really, it's a balancing act, and we did the best that we could to try to meet as broad an audience as possible. We did not want to dumb it down, so we left in information that was somewhat technical. But we just assumed that the general public would, hear that, and if it was above their level of understanding, that they would just have to ignore that. We did really try to explain what homeopathy is, because most people don't know. They think that most people believe that homeopathy is just potentized medicines. And it's actually not. I mean, you don't have to potentize a medicine. You don't have to dilute it and succuss it for it to be applied homeopathically. It just needs to be given based on the law of similars. And so that's really what homeopathy is. Early in his life, Hahnemann was actually giving mother tincture of remedies. Matter of fact, all the remedies that he proved until 1830 were all done. All the plants were done with mother tincture, and all the metals were done in a 1x titration. So it's not the fact that they're being potentized, it's the fact that you're giving them based on the law of similars. Now, the reason that we potentize them, obviously, is that many of the substances that we use are very toxic, and we don't want to subject the person to, serious side effects. So we dilute it to the point where that's going to be mitigated significantly. But really, that's what it is. And I think we did a reasonably good job of explaining it in the film, that that's really what it is. And we gave some really clear examples. And then, of course, you got to see it play out in the patient stories.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for helping spread the word of homeopathy. It's very helpful to practitioners like myself who maybe struggle sometimes to go into a 2 hour long history of homeopathy in a 1 hour long appointment. So,
Well,
um,
Erin, thank you so much for all the good work you're doing to promote homeopathy, and thank you for inviting me to be on here.
Absolutely. So, Kim, before we go, I've got our 8 rapid fire questions. We ask
Okay.
these of all of our all of our guests. And they are designed just to kind of give us a little bit more insight into who you are.
Okay.
So, number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One natural remedy for the rest of my life, drinking clean water.
Nice. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
Oh, hold on a second. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to. Something that, I used to collect coins.
Ah, interesting. If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
I would put on the fourth movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Nice. And what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Uh, Chocolate ice cream.
What is the most influential book you've ever read?
The Knee of Listening.
And what does the word revolution mean to you?
A fundamental change in the current situation.
What does the word remedy mean to you?
The resolution of a particular issue.
And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
To do service in the world, to help others, to stop, to not think about yourself, but think about serving humanity and all living beings. That's how you find happiness in life.
Thank you so much, Kim Elia, for being our guest today. You can find more information about the film Introducing Homeopathy at introducinghomeopathy.com. Again, please go and register for that private screening happening May 31st through June the 3rd. We would love it if you would participate and give feedback. Please give feedback on the podcast, give feedback to Introducing Homeopathy, the film, because I know that they are very much looking forward to getting this film out into the world and hearing how all of you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you all next time. Take
Thank you,
care.
Aaron. Thank you.